evening, everyone. In the study of American art history, it has been noted that the names of women artists who worked in the 1930s are some of the least familiar and most overlooked. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to just one of those unfamiliar and often ignored artists. Her name is Claire Mahl Moore. Her career as an artist lasted over 50 years, beginning with the prints she produced in the 1930s under the Federal Art Project of the Works Progress Administration, or WPA, and ending with her death in 1988. Although she studied with and worked alongside several more famous names than her own, including David Alfaro Siqueiros, Thomas Hart Benton, and Jackson Pollock, she never achieved widespread critical recognition. And though there has been a large body of scholarship produced on WPA artists, more is often omitted or relegated to a footnote. However, an examination of the body of work she produced for the WPA reveals not only a compelling blend of aesthetic styles, but also a unique treatment of contemporary social issues that displays a remarkable consideration of women's experiences during the Depression. Moore was 22 years old and married to her first husband when she began working for the government relief programs. However, in her government paperwork, she refers to herself with her maiden name, Millman, as well as her chosen art pseudonym, Mahl, Claire Mahl. She also always signed her WPA prints with Mahl and on the rare occasion Millman, but never with her married name. This early insistence on maintaining an independent identity is reflected in the bold lithographs she created during this time period. The WPA was integral to Moore's technical, aesthetic, and intellectual development, not only because it provided access to free, quality materials and a regular paycheck, but also because the Federal Art Project provided one of the first instances of equal pay in the workplace for men and women. This was anachronistic in terms of almost every other work environment in the 1930s, which typically segregated both labor and pay scale along gender lines. This surprising egalitarian employment practice was especially significant for women artists. Moore created over 40 prints while employed by the government, the majority of which primarily featured female figures. During a time when prints overwhelmingly focused on men's experiences, this departure is worthy of our attention. Feminist theory has long argued that social and cultural norms consider the male experience to be universally relatable, while the experiences of women remain only relevant to women. This skewed notion is ever present in literature, film, advertising, politics, and of course, the visual arts. Women artists in the 1930s were well aware of this bias. As scholar Helen Langa has noted, quote, "Professionalism generally encouraged women artists to remain within gender conventions of representation that projected themes of male/public experience as more compelling for both artists and for a mass audience than female/private subjects," end quote. The fact that Moore chose to depict women's experiences while the majority of her peers favored male subjects, at the risk of being viewed as unprofessional, is all the more reason to fully investigate her body of work. Because many WPA artists worked in a social realist vein and focused their efforts on contemporary social issues, labor and work were popular themes in prints. The idea of labor is almost always intertwined with masculinity. Thus, these themes often depicted male figures as either iconographic symbols of the debilitating effects of the Depression, as seen in Blanche Graham's print, No Work, or as symbols of the American work ethic and the promise of industrial pursuits, as seen in Harry Sternberg's print, Builders. Moore differed from the norm and chose to focus on the experiences of women and their work environments, ranging from fairly tame representations of secretarial work, as seen in her print, The Typist, on the left, to more radical depictions of women as exploited assembly line laborers, as seen in Speed Up, on the right. While Moore uses a realist style in The Typist, she doesn't provide a fully fleshed out narrative scene. Instead, Moore eliminates all but the figure and her occupational tools, focusing on the figure's identity as a working woman. However, in Speed Up, she takes a more critical stance on unjust labor practices, and her blending of the surreal and the real allow her to reach beyond a simple representation of lived experience and offer a critique of the systemic imbalance of both gender and class in a capitalist system. Moore explores this idea further in her rather horrific print, Juggernaut, in which female laborers exhibit missing limbs, exposed bones, and melting eyeballs. Orchestrating this morbid scene from above is a large pig with human hands, a swastika tail, and a banker's top hat displaying a $sign symbol. Moore certainly did not shy away from bold political commentary. This type of social critique was not uncommon among WPA artists. However, Moore extends her critique of social structures to experiences that uniquely affect women. In Factory Wedding, one of a 4 lithograph series that Moore created to explore, quote, significant events of human life, like birth, death, etc., end quote, she uses an exaggerated drawing style to create figures whose expressions indicate a somber occasion, rather than a celebratory one. The surrounding environment of apprehension and the bride's obviously rotund midsection reveal that perhaps the wedding was not a mutual choice, but an unfortunate necessity. The grim expression of the bride and the distance she's placing between herself and her husband suggests a resistance toward her newly prescribed role of wife. Perhaps Moore's most radical depiction of womanhood and its most universal role, the mother, is found in the print The Birth. Here, Moore gives us a contrasting image to conventional mother and child imagery that is often depicted as sentimental and nurturing. Using surrealist imagery and montage, Moore addresses motherhood in a direct and terrifying way. This dystopian image allows for several interpretations. Taking into account the industrial background, the male figures surrounding a rotating gear, and the disembodied hand moving the child away from its parents, Moore may be commenting on the unease women felt towards giving birth at a time when levels of unemployment and labor exploitation were high. However, the appearance of the lifeless pregnant mother and the severely swaddled child displayed in the surreal poem may indicate a death of some sort, and perhaps allude to a stillborn child or a maternal death. Either possibility reveals that Moore may have been concerned with the often unspoken risks women are exposed to during pregnancy and childbirth. Although artists working for the WPA were given a large amount of freedom with their work, it was generally understood that nudes and themes relating to sexuality were to be avoided. In a decision that can only properly be described as ballsy, Moore chose to depict not only 2 nude women in this print, one visibly pregnant and neither for a titillating effect, but she also chose to depict a nude man, excuse me, a vulnerable, naked man in the arms of his partner. This shared vulnerability suggests an equality between partners. While the physicality of pregnancy and childbearing is certainly a woman's role alone, Moore may be commenting on the unrecognized necessity of partnership and support for this role, particularly in the frightening and tragic moments that can occur in childbirth. While depicting female figures more often than male figures is not a feminist act in itself, Moore's representational choices allow for female figures to be perceived in a multitude of ways that do not rely on the woman's nurturing or erotic appeal. While the nuclear female body is frequently used to depict sensuality, femininity, and outbursts of fertility in nature, Moore uses the nude here in Portrait of a Pioneer Woman to highlight the figure's vulnerability and show the feelings of isolation and displacement felt by many during the Depression. Moore's women present an alternative to the notion that the male experience is universally relatable, while the experiences of women are not. By introducing women as members of the laboring classes, Moore eschewed the more common portrayal of labor as synonymous with masculinity. By portraying significant occasions such as weddings and childbirth without idealization and with raw emotion, Moore allows for deeper and more variable interpretations. Moore's prints provide insight into women's experiences that is both sensitive and unnerving. As Susan Teller observed of Moore's use of the figure throughout her career, she portrays, quote, characters who meet the challenge head-on, but who know it will be a struggle, end quote. This underlying resilience is a consistent thread throughout her work. By examining just some of the prints by Moore created by Moore for the WPA, my aim is not only to promote further scholarship on her career, but also provoke new research into the many unfamiliar artists who worked for the government relief programs. Despite a lack of overt feminist activism in the medieval era, there is evidence of an undercurrent of feminist sensibility that can be found in Moore's prints. Further research into the understudied artists of the WPA may reveal similar feminist sentiments and allow us to look at the work from this time period with a fresh perspective. Thank you.